Yes, good morning, all. Welcome to one more session of pharmacology. Myself, Dr. Bharat Kumar Vidi. And we start your session today with a photo of a baby. Now, if you see this baby, what you find out here? What is the abnormality? Now, the abnormality what we have shown here is the baby has turned its head to one side, and this is what we call by torticollis, and that is because of the spasm of the muscles of the neck. So the muscles of the neck have undergone spasm. So this is one case. Now second one is, this is a lady, she has the dislocation of shoulder joint. So the joint has been dislocated. Now because of dislocation the muscles have undergone spasm and she is under severe pain. Now the orthopedician wants to relocate this joint back. He has to relocate this joint back. Now to do that operation he has to relax the muscles, and then only he can push it back into the joint space. Now, moving on to another one, whenever there is a fracture, you need to reduce this fracture. There also you require the muscle relaxation. Now, this is a procedure. I think you have seen in the recent COVID time, many patients are undergoing this procedure during the COVID pandemic, because this is nothing but this is the intubation technique. So intubation technique is nothing but we pass a endotracheal tube into the mouth. From there, it will go to the trachea. From there, it will be helpful in giving artificial respiration. So we call it as mechanical ventilation. So when you do this procedure, that is called the endotracheal intubation, the muscles of the neck, the mouth should get relaxed. So here also we require muscle relaxation. So this is the same procedure. Now, why I gave all these images? Because in all these procedures, what we require is skeletal muscle relaxants. So we need to relax the skeletal muscles. Now think and tell me, how can we relax the skeletal muscles? What is the procedure? Now you know from physiology that the skeletal muscles, they are like this. So this is the nerve and this is the muscle. Now, this is the nerve and this is the muscle. We call them as neuromuscular junction. You know this junction, that is called neuromuscular junction. Now, the neurotransmitter that is released whenever the muscle has to contract is acetylcholine. So, the acetylcholine acts on the NM receptor, and that will cause the muscle contraction. So, this is for the peripheral muscles. Now imagine that in a cricket or any sports, some sportsman is running and suddenly gets the spasm of the muscle. Now he has only get a spasm of muscles, so we can relax the muscles by acting on CNS also. So basically, the muscle relaxants are two varieties. Let me repeat: the muscle relaxants are two varieties. One is those acting on the central nervous system; they are called centrally acting skeletal muscle relaxants. And second one is the peripheral acting skeletal muscle relaxant. So the image what I have written is, this is pointing towards the drugs which act as the peripheral skeletal muscle relaxant. That is, they act at the neuromuscular junction. So they are called peripheral skeletal muscle relaxant. So how can we relax the muscle? Now what we can do, the receptor is NM, so you block this NM receptor. So you can block this NM receptor, that will cause muscle relaxation. So it's simple. The next one is, we have one more drug, and that is called succinylcholine. So this succinylcholine drug will bind to this NM receptor, and by binding to this NM receptor, what it will do, it will desensitize the receptor, and because of that, what happens? Initially, there will be fasciculation, that means muscle contraction, and there will be later a relaxation of the muscle. So we have two types of peripheral skeletal muscle relaxants. One is called the depolarizing, that is the succinylcholine is a depolarizing skeletal muscle relaxant. That means it will go bind to the NM receptor and allow the entry of sodium and calcium. Muscle contraction occurs initially, but later there will be muscle relaxation. So that is why it causes depolarization. It is called depolarizing skeletal muscle relaxant. The next one is the non-depolarizing skeletal muscle relaxant. That means these will not depolarize the muscle, they will only block the receptor. So these are also called as competitive skeletal muscle relaxant, because they compete with acetylcholine for binding. they compete with acetylcholine for binding. So this is the basics I had to give you in the beginning. Now moving on to the definition, I already told you we have two types of skeletal muscle relaxant: central acting and peripheral acting. Centrally acting, I told you, they act at neuromuscular junction, and some of the drugs can act directly on the muscle. So in the muscle, you know from physiology that there is a sarcoplasmic reticulum. We call it as sarcoplasmic reticulum, and from there is a receptor called ryanodine receptor. So that will release calcium, and that is responsible for contraction of the muscle. Now that release of calcium from ryanodine receptor can also be blocked. So then centrally acting skeletal muscle relaxant, they act at the mainly CNS, that is cerebrospinal axis. Now what is the difference between peripheral and central acting, guys? Centrally acting means they go to the CNS and they suppress the polysynaptic reflex. So whenever somebody falls, they will have muscle spasm. So what happens immediately? There is reflex pathway which will cause spasm. So I need to sedate the CNS. Now, will the voluntary power be lost in centrally acting drugs? No. Patient voluntary power is not lost. But peripherally acting, there is loss of tone and also voluntary power is lost. That means the patient cannot contract its muscles. So that's why this peripheral acting, they are mainly used in anesthesia, and central acting you can use it in a day-to-day clinic activities to treat spasms, and these are only for OT procedures. Now with that basics in the mind, let us move on. Why should we know about SKMRs? What is the reason? The reason is, I told you in the beginning itself, there are patients who come with spasms, there are patients who come with the dislocation of the joint, fractures, and you want to intubate. And during anesthesia, I want to relax the muscles. So, there we require. So, I have written here muscle paralysis, and they are required to as adjuvants to general anesthesia during surgeries and ICU. The centrally acting are also called as spasmolytics. They decrease spasticity in painful conditions. So imagine yourself, you're running and suddenly you fall down and the muscle spasm occurs. So in that case, we can give these drugs. Now, what is the history? How did we find out these drugs? Now, many a times, why should we read history is we need to understand what was the evaluation, how did they plan that, so that in the future, now we are in the COVID pandemic, we don't know what drugs are there for that, but still the research is going on. At least if I know some bit of history, so because of the history only we know that there was second wave, first wave, third wave, everything with the Spanish flu. So that's why history is important. Now how did this muscle relaxant story begin? That in the South American countries, particularly Amazon forest, they used to hunt the animals. So they used to take a plant and they used to put it in the tip of the arrow. So that arrow they used to blow and that will go to the animal and the animal used to get paralyzed. So from that plant, what they obtained was the first skeletal muscle relaxant, that is called D-tuberculorin. So the drug is called D-tuberculorin, and that was the first skeletal muscle that was used during 1930s. See how amazing that we observed this and we adapted that in the management of many cases in the future. Now, I told you this normal neuromuscular function, you know that from physiology, but let me repeat here just for your background knowledge. So, you know that this is the nerve and this is the muscle. So, there will be action potential, and you know that sodium enters, calcium enters, and there will be release of acetylcholine from the vesicles. So, they bind to the receptor NM, and by that, there will be action potential, muscle fibers contract. Now this acetylcholine is broken down by acetylcholinesterase. So like this, the muscle contraction occurs. Now remember, the NM receptor is a ion channel receptor. So it is made up of 5 structures. It is called pentameric: alpha, gamma, delta, alpha, beta. So the binding should be 2 acetylcholine molecules to this receptor. Then only sodium enters inside. So then you see this action potential, then muscle contraction. So keeping this in mind, the scientists thought what we can do is either we can use succinylcholine or we block this receptor by giving D-tuberculin. So acetylcholine binds to NM receptor, a muscle action potential generated, excitation, contraction, coupling occurs. So this is your physiology. Now what does a pharmacologist will do? Now pharmacologist has to block that. So before that, let me explain the classification of this peripheral one. The peripheral one are called directly acting. I told you what is directly acting. They directly act in the muscle, not in the neuromuscular junction. We have dantrolene sodium and we have quinine. So dantrolene sodium mainly inhibits the release of calcium from ryanodine receptor, and if that is not released, obviously there will not be skeletal muscle contraction. Now, depolarizing. So this is what I told you. Depolarizing blocker is the main drug is called succinylcholine, and one more is decamethonium, and that is not used nowadays. Only what we use is succinylcholine. Now, non-depolarizing blockers are nothing but they are competitive blockers, D-tuberculin and pancuronium. So there are other drugs I will tell you in the future slides. Okay, so what is the difference between a depolarizing and non-depolarizing blocker? Let me tell you that. I told you already, depolarizing blocker means it's a succinylcholine. Succinylcholine is like a brother of acetylcholine. They will do the same thing. Now here, when we give a depolarizing blocker, it occupy and activate the NM receptor for prolonged time. So what happens if you prolongly activate a receptor? The receptor will undergo desensitization. That means the receptor will not work. So that will lead to the conduction blockade at neuromuscular junction. So like that they will relax. But non-depolarizing blockers are also called as competitive. So they compete with acetylcholine to bind to the NM receptor. See here, completely antagonize the action of acetylcholine and NM receptor, then there is blockade. So these are called non-depolarized. That means they will not depolarize the tissue. That means the sodium will not enter there. That's the meaning of non-depolarizing. Now we are done with that. Now let us first discuss the non-depolarizing blockers, how they are classified into. Now they are classified into the long acting, intermediate acting and short acting. So three classification depending on the duration. Those acting for more than 35 minutes, these are D-tuberculin, metacurine, galamine, pancuronium, pipecuronium and doxacurium. So these are long acting. Now where do you use long acting? Suppose you want to do a surgery for a very long time, then we prefer this. Intermediate acting are atracurium, cisatracurium, vicuronium, rocuronium, and rapacurium. And the shortest one is the mivacurium, and it is only for 10 to 15 minutes. So where do we use this mivacurium like 10 to 15 minutes? Whenever you are doing short procedures like intubation. So when you want to do intubation, passing the endotracheal tube into the trachea, you have to relax the muscles of the phoropharynx. So then we use this drug. Now you also see here, the long acting ones are excreted in by kidney. The intermediate one are excreted mainly by the bile. And why this mivacurium is short acting? Because it is metabolized by the plasma cholinesterase. So in general, you remember the drugs metabolized by the plasma cholinesterase, also called as pseudocholinesterase, they will be usually short acting because the plasma will inactivate them very fast. That's the reason. Now we know the drugs now. Now you can also classify them in two varieties. First classification what I gave is I gave you depending on the duration of action. Now you can also derive them as those chemically derived as isoquinoline derivatives and ones which are steroidal derivatives. Now what is the difference between the both? Now isoquinoline derivatives all end with urium. So if you read the names, let me go back. Urium, right? Urium. So you can have another drug name here. It is curonium. So curoniums are steroidal, but urium is here. Urium. So these are the different aspect. So isoquinones end with urium. For example, atracurium. Now, what are the drugs you remember as TAMM? So what are the drugs TAM? T for tuberculin, atracurium, mivacurium, metacurium. They release histamine. Now let them release histamine. What is the problem? The problem when the drug releases histamine is, you know from physiology, histamine can cause vasodilation, so it will cause decrease in blood pressure. Second one is histamine release will cause bronchoconstriction. So when I use these drugs in a patient with asthma, I should be very careful. So I told you these drugs also block ganglionic receptors. Now why does D-tuberculin and metacurine block ganglionic receptor? So remember, ganglion, the subtype of receptor is NN. So they will block NM. Along with that, they also block NM receptor. That is what we mean by ganglionic blockade. So because of this ganglionic blockade, they may cause decrease in blood pressure also. Now, steroidal drugs, they are called uroniums. They do not release histamine, no effect on autonomic ganglia. So this is what we want. So no effect on ganglia, very good. We want that because we don't want to have non-specific action by a drug. Suppose I want a drug to act on NM, it should only act there. But if it acts on other places, the problem is side effects. So that's why the steroidal came to the market and they end with uroniums. Uroniums are the drugs which are no histamine release and no effect on autonomic ganglia. What is the mechanism of action? You know this again, but let me explain here. You see the image, carefully observe this. Yes, come on, come on. Now, this is the NN receptor. When the non depolarizing blocker sits on this, the gate is closed, so sodium cannot enter. So there will be decrease in postsynaptic potential, failure to trigger the action potential, no contraction, and what you see is flaccid paralysis. Now, flaccid paralysis means that without contraction, the muscle undergo paralysis. So this is the mechanism of action which we have already told you. Now, moving on to the effect on skeletal muscles. Now, who will get affected? Suppose I give a muscle relaxant to someone. Which muscles will relax first? Now, the fast acting and the muscles with high blood supply. For example, you imagine in your body which are faster acting fingers. Yes, extraocular muscles. So they will get affected first, and the facial muscles. Then the larger muscles are more resistant, so they will not become relaxed in the initial phase. The last to relax is the diaphragm, and the recovery is reverse order. When you stop these drugs, which muscle will recover first? First is diaphragm, then the larger muscles, then the small fast response fibers. So this is the reverse order. So see the beauty of nature. Now, if the first muscle was diaphragm to be paralyzed, what happens? Patient will die because diaphragm is required for respiration, right? Yes. So like this, the muscle relaxation proceeds when we give the drug. Now, if you don't intubate the patient will have muscle relaxation of the intercostal muscles of the thorax, and the diaphragm will relax, so patient cannot breathe. He may die because of respiratory failure. So one of the complication of giving this peripheral skeletal muscle relaxant is patient may die, but will the anesthetist do that? He will not allow that. So what do we do? We give something called the intubation. We will monitor the patient and we give artificial, that is mechanical ventilation. You have seen a bag they are pumping, so that will even the diaphragm is paralyzed. We are making that muscle to contract and relax. So this is what we do. Now, what are the other points we need to understand? These don't cross blood-brain barrier. These competitive blockers, they don't cross blood-brain barrier. That means they don't act in the brain. Now, they enhance paralytic ileus. That means they relax the GIT. So that's why if you observe that after operation, we don't tell the patient to immediately drink the water or take food because the ileum is under paralysis. So if they drink also, they may vomit. Now, because of ganglionic blockade, it may produce hypertension, increase in heart rate because of blockade of the parasympathetic ganglia, arrhythmias, and arrest can occur if it is at higher doses. Now, because of histamine release, there will be decrease in BP, flushing, and bronchospasm, which I told you, and also they can produce ganglionic blockade. So, these are the problems what we face with this drugs, that is peripherally acting skeletal muscle relaxant. But the difference between succinylcholine is succinylcholine will not increase heart rate. In fact, it causes bradycardia because it mainly blocks the vagal ganglia, that is the parasympathetic. But succinylcholine will stimulate the ganglia, but the non-depolarizing blockers, they cause ganglion blockade. Why succinyl will stimulate ganglia? Because it acts on the NN receptor similar to succinylcholine and thereby it stimulates the ganglia. So that's the difference between the depolarizing and non-depolarizing. So remember these points, guys. Now, can we give this drug orally? These drugs cannot be given oral because they are high quaternary compounds, charged molecules. They don't cross blood-brain barrier. Obviously, they will not cross the mucosal barrier of the intestine. Now, let us come to the individual compounds. Now, what is a drug? D-tuberculin was the first drug. It was causing histamine release ganglionic blockade. Because of that, patient used to face severe side effects like decrease in blood pressure. Then there was increase in heart rate. So now the usage has come down, obsolete. Now we are not using. Now then came pancuronium. It was long acting, relative cardiovascular safe, so it increased the heart rate and the PP was not affected much. So this is a longer acting, so I will prefer for prolonged surgeries. Doxycycline, longest action, and it will have fast, least rapid onset of action. That means it will start working after some time, but it will work for longer time. Vicodinium, it's the shortest duration of recovery and spontaneous recovery. It is the most commonly used SKMR in the practice. So when you go to anesthesia, please see all those things. You can ask the anesthetics, sir, what is the skeletal muscle relaxant you are using to this patient? So you will come across these things. Now, the drugs doxycurium, rocuronium, vicodinium are essentially free of cardiovascular and histamine effects. So that's why we can use them extensively in the anesthetic practice. Now, moving on to atracurium. Now, specialty of atracurium, I think you have read in general pharmacology also, there is a type of elimination called Hoffman's elimination. So this is a 3 marks question in your university. Which drug undergoes Hoffman's elimination? It is the atracurium. What is Hoffman's elimination? That means the drug will undergo spontaneous molecular rearrangement and then it will get eliminated out. And their drug will not depend, the elimination will not depend on the kidney status or the renal status. That's why we can use it in a patient with renal disease or a patient with hepatitis. Now, one of the problem what they faced was the metabolism of this gave rise to a molecule called lardosine, and that was causing seizures in the patient. And also, this was releasing histamine. Now, that's the reason they came with one more molecule that is called cis-atracurium. The specialty is it's an enantiomer, but it's not hydrolyzed by cholinesterase, but this is hydrolyzed by cholinesterase. Cis-atracurium also doesn't release histamine, and that's why the decrease in blood pressure and bronchospasm is not seen. So this was one of the one-liner that was asked. Rocuronium has fast onset of action, precise timing. So that means it will work within 60 to 120 seconds. Suppose you want to intubate faster and you want a fast-acting drug, excuse me. So rocuronium will act very fast, onset of action. So suppose you cannot use a succinylcholine, then you can go with rocuronium. Muvacurium is the shortest acting, but it is metabolized by pseudocholinesterase, that is phosphocholinesterase. It can cause apnea and genetic variants. I will tell you what is this apnea and genetic variants in a short period of time. So again, look into this drugs, guys: D-tuberculin, pancuronium, doxycuronium, vicuronium. And what is commonly asked is this point: the etracurium and Hoffman's elimination, and the drug is safe in hepatic and renal disease. Why? That is the reason. So remember, what is Hoffman's elimination? It is the spontaneous molecular rearrangement of the drug, so it can get away from the body without metabolism. Now, that drug elimination doesn't depend on the hepatic or renal status of the patient. So, if you want to use a skeletal muscle relaxant in them, this is better. That is atracurium. Now, moving on to the next topic, that is the depolarizing blocker, and that is called succinylcholine. Now, the specialty of succinylcholine is it will act very fast. That means within 1 to 2 minutes it will start working. And how much duration is? It is only for 5 to 10 minutes. Now, why should I relax a muscle for 5 to 10 minutes? We will relax it when we are doing a endotracheal intubation. So why it is very short acting? Because it is hydrolyzed by plasma cholinesterase. They are also called as pseudocholinesterase. Decomethonium we are not using nowadays, so we will not discuss much about that. So let us discuss succinylcholine. Now this succinylcholine is also called depolarizing blocker. Why? Because it will bind to the NM receptor similar to the acetylcholine. So there will be entry of sodium, so that will cause repeated muscle contraction. Now what happens if muscle contracts repeatedly? We call it as fasciculation. Now when there is fasciculation, what happens? Patient will feel the pain after the surgery. So when the patient comes out of surgery, because there was muscle contraction, they will have pain or soreness of muscle. Now, Affinity, they have submaximal activity. That means they don't produce so much activity similar to acetylcholine, but they will allow the entry of sodium. They do not rapidly dissociate from receptor. So what happens? There will prolonged depolarization, and that's why if you give it an anticholinesterase like neostigmine, this will increase. So it will produce fasciculation. That's what I told you, and they will produce flaccid paralysis because of the receptor desensitization. Now, my question to you all is: suppose I gave this drugs like atracurium or I gave pancuronium to some patient. Now I want to, because pancuronium is very long acting, I want to terminate its action. Now pancuronium is a competitive blocker. Now how do I overcome that competitive blocker? By giving agonist. So how do I give a agonist? Acetylcholine. Now I cannot use acetylcholine because acetylcholine therapeutically it will work for only 3 to 5 minutes in the body. So that's the reason we use neostigmine, because neostigmine will act indirectly and increases acetylcholine level, and that's why we use it there. That is for reversing these actions of skeletal muscle relaxants. But can I use it for succinylcholine? No, because if you increase acetylcholine, succinylcholine, both are brothers, so they will increase this flaccid paralysis. So that's why we cannot reverse it, and we cannot reverse it with this because anyhow after 5 minutes its action going to be terminated. So patient will have brief period of apnea. What do you mean by apnea? The patient cannot breathe for that minute. Why? Because I told you these drugs relaxes the diaphragm. If the muscle diaphragm gets relaxed, you cannot breathe. So that's the reason. Now, dual mechanism is seen. So first is the phase one because of the depolarization. Now there will be prolonged depolarization. So initially there will be muscle fasciculation, passive paralysis. Now the phase two is desensitization blockade. That means if you continuously stimulate the receptor, what happens? The receptor will undergo desensitization. What do you mean by desensitization? Suppose you are wearing a cap on your head. So initially you will feel that there is a cap, and if you wear that every day, the receptor will undergo desensitization. So that's the reason. If I continuously stimulate that NM receptor, they will undergo desensitization. This is slow process. Now this resembles a non-depolarizing blocker because even we have receptor, but the receptors cannot elicit any response because this is desensitized. Now this is very common if you use succinylcholine with fluorinated anesthetics, for example, halothane. So like that, if you are using that, this is seen. So main thing what we see in humans is phase one, and it will cause flaccid paralysis because of muscle fasciculation. And what happens later is if you infuse this succinylcholine for a very long time, this is seen. Now, what is the effect on skeletal muscles? I told you this. There will be transient fasciculations over chest, wall, abdomen, neck, limbs, then face, jaw, pharynx, trunk. Excellent intubation conditions. So all the muscles of the neck, face, jaw, pharynx, they relax, and even the patient will have apnea for 2 to 5 minutes. So 2 to 5 minutes, he will not die. Until that, the intubation would have been done, so he would be rescued. But this is rapid, complete, and predictable paralysis. But there is some problem. What is that problem? In few people, they have genetic variation. Now tell me, how is succinylcholine metabolized? It's by an enzyme. Now what is enzyme? Is a protein. From where does it the protein gets synthesized? It is from the translation, then transcription. So there is a gene involved in that. But that's the gene. If there is a gene, the gene may be defective in few people. So there are certain people who doesn't produce this. They who doesn't produce this pseudocholinesterase. So they produce something called atypical pseudocholinesterase, which will not metabolize succinylcholine. Now, if they don't metabolize succinylcholine, what happens when I give this succinylcholine to that patient, thinking that it will work for 5 to 10 minutes? Now, succinylcholine is not broken down by that. So, because of that, the duration of action of succinylcholine will increase for 4 to 6 hours. Now, if the patient goes for apnea for 4 to 6 hours, he may die. So, that's why what we do is when the patient has this problem, if he has this atypical pseudocholinesterase, what we have to do is we have to put the patient on mechanical ventilation. That means we have to put the patient on artificial respiration, and we have to give fresh frozen plasma because it contains in normal people the pseudocholinesterase. Now, genetically abnormal variant of plasmacholinostress, it is shown by succinylcholine and myocurium. So I told you I will discuss this myocurium concept later. Myocurium has this metabolism by pseudocholinesterase. How do I know that? How do I know that whether the patient is having this genetic problem also? Now that is done by testing a Dibuk number. Now if the Dibuk number is high, that means the patient has a chance of succinylcholine apnea. So in that patients, better to go with other skeletal muscle relaxant during intubation. So that is one of the way to avoid this problem. So you see here, if you give it to the normal patient, the succinylcholine dose, the apnea duration is very short. But if you give it a deficient patient, the apnea duration keeps on increasing. This is the graph explaining that. Right. So this is called succinyl colon apnea. So this is a 3 marks question, guys. What is succinyl colon apnea? I will tell you in 3 lines. It is because of the genetic defect of pseudocholinesterase. Because of that abnormal pseudocholinesterase, the succinyl is not metabolized, so it will cause diaphragm paralysis. The apnea will be longer lasting. Now the treatment for that is mechanical ventilation, and it is also by fresh frozen plasma. How do I detect it? By Dibuk number. Okay, so succinylcholine, I told you it can produce transient bradycardia because it blocks the vagus, that is parasympathetic outflow, and it will stimulate the ganglia. Now, one more important point I want to add up here is whenever we use succinylcholine can also increase potassium levels. Now, it releases potassium from the muscles because of contraction. Now, whenever you use this succinylcholine in a patient with muscle injury, suppose where do you get a muscle injury patient? When the patient comes with trauma, there is crush injury, or he comes with burns injury or nerve injuries. Already because of that the cells are destroyed, the potassium is already into the circulation. So in that patients don't use succinylcholine because the potassium hyperkalemia is a problem in this patient. So these are the points you have to keep in your mind. So don't use this succinylcholine in soft tissue injury, muscle injuries, then nerve injuries or burns patient, because it will lead to increased potassium, and you know that potassium if it is increased can cause cardiac arrhythmias. Now where to use this skeletal muscle relaxants? Where to use it? Now we use this skeletal muscle relaxant in anesthesia, because in anesthesia we need to relax the muscles and we have to control the reflexes. And also when you are doing thoracic and abdominal surgeries, short procedures, for example endoscopy, you want to check the intestine, you want to check the stomach, esophagus, then you have to relax the patient when you want to check the esophagus. So you can see here laryngoscopy, you want to look into the bronchoscopy, then whenever you want to do fracture reduction, there we use those drugs. Now we also use them in assisted ventilation to decrease wall resistance. What is are seeing now in COVID-19, this was done whenever there is assisted ventilation. Electroconvulsive therapy, that means whenever the patient is having severe psychiatric disorder or severe depression, then we give something called electric shock. In that case, we want to relax the muscle. Severe tetanus, you can see here this is opisthotonus position. So there also we want to relax the muscle. And status epilepticus, only if it is a resistant case, then we use these drugs. Yes. Now, what is the problem when I use a skeletal muscle relaxant? Is it easy? Can I give it in OPD? No. These has to be given in an ICU setting or in a hospital setting. The first complication what I face is respiratory paralysis. Why? Because they affect the diaphragm, but patient will not die because we have the artificial respiration given through ambu bag or something like that. Hypertension and CV collapse, arrhythmia, hyperkalemia, particularly with succinylcholine. I told you this. Asthma, particularly with the drugs releasing histamine. Now, what is the drug interaction? Particularly if you use succinylcholine with oral style anesthetic, there is a complication called malignant hyperthermia. The temperature goes up severely because there will be release of calcium from ryanodine receptor. For that, the drug of choice is dantrolene. Now, general anesthetics, if you use with SKMR, they potentiate the action. That means they increase that. Some of the antimicrobials, aminoglycosides, tetracyclines, clindamycin, they potentiate the skeletal muscle relaxants, even calcium channel blockers and anticholinesterase. But anticholinesterase like neostigmine, they reverse the block. I told you already, this is where we use them to reverse the block. Now, We are done with the indirectly acting ones, that is depolarizing and non-depolarizing. Directly acting one is the one which will directly act in the muscle itself or in the calcium channel. It is called the dantrolene. Now, dantrolene is a derivative of hydantoin. It is related to phenytoin. It interferes with excitation contraction coupling in muscle fibers. As I already told you, it blocks the release of calcium from ryanodine receptor. That is the mechanism of action. Will it act on neuromuscular junction? No, it has nothing to do there. It is directly acting skeletal muscle relaxant. When you give orally, it is well absorbed, produces sedation, some diarrhea, but it reduces voluntary power. That means when dantrolene is given, you cannot lift your hand. That is, voluntary power is also lost. Dose is 25 to 100 milligram QID. You can also use in upper motor neuron lesion to reduce spasticity. Now, dantrolene, where it is drug of choice, the drug of choice of dantrolene is mainly in malignant hyperthermia. Now, what is malignant hyperthermia? It is also a pharmacogenetic condition. For example, if you are using fluorinated anesthetics and succinylcholine, for example, fluorinated anesthetic like halothane, enflurane, isoflurane, desflurane, sevoflurane, with that, the calcium, what happens? The calcium gets released from the ryanodine receptor, and this will start stimulating the actin myosin filaments, and the patient will have increased muscle contraction. Now, what happens if you contract the muscles more and more? The body temperature increases. Now, when patient has fever, why do they get chills? Because the chills cause muscle contraction, so that's why the body temperature increases. So here, in malignant hyperthermia, the calcium released from ryanodine receptor is responsible for increased temperature. Now, what to do with that? In that condition, what we give is dantrolene sodium. It will block the ryanodine receptor and increase the calcium release. So that's a drug of choice for that. And also we have one more condition called neural malignant syndrome, and it is because of D2 blockade in the CNS. For that also the drug of choice is dantrolene sodium. Now, until now, we discussed the peripheral acting skeletal muscle relaxant. One is direct and indirect. Direct is dantrolene. Indirect is we have depolarizing, that is succinylcholine, non-depolarizing like D2 pancuronium. Centrally acting skeletal muscle relaxants, the meaning is they act, that means they can cross the blood brain barrier. They will not cause voluntary power loss. That means when you take this drug, the muscle contraction will be there. But the tone is relaxed, so muscle will relax for this. Now, the problem with these drugs are they can produce sedation. Now, these are also called as antispasm drug or spasmolytic drugs. They relax smooth muscle by selectively acting on CNS, that is cerebrospinal axis. They will not alter the consciousness, but they will produce sedation. Now, mainly they will depress the polysynaptic reflex arc. Now, this is a stress reflex you have seen there. Whenever there is a muscle stretch, there will be afferent fibers going to the spinal cord, efferent fibers, so they will relax the muscles. Now, what is spasticity? It is characterized by increase in tonic stress reflexes and increase in basal tone. So, it is the basal tone which we have to relax. Now, what do they do? These stress reflexes will act on the CNS and depress this, and thereby there will be muscle relaxation. So, what are the drugs we have, guys? We have benzodiazepine, that is diazepam, GABA B derivative, that is baclofen, mefenacin derivatives, mefenacin congeners, that is mefenacin, carisoprodol, chlorzoxone, chlorbenzone, and methocarbamol. At least remember any three. They will ask in the exam, mention any three is central acting. Remember diazepam, baclofen, and chlorzoxazone, mefenacin. And central alpha 2 agonist is tizanidine, and one more is Botox, that is botulinum toxin. Now, how mefenacin blocks this? Now, most of the drug action is in the central nervous system. There will be multiple polysynaptic reflex, they block it. That much you remember, that's it. So, this polysynaptic reflex is blocked by one is baclofen because it acts on GABA B, tizanidine acts on alpha 2 receptor, and GABA A is benzodiazepines. So baclofen is, I told you, GABA B, tizanidine is alpha 2 agonist. So both are inhibitory in nature. So they increase potassium conducts, inhibit substance P, less sedation, but when you abruptly stop them, they will cause seizures. Where do you use them? We use them in multiple sclerosis, migraine, decreasing craving in alcohol, and trigeminal neuralgia. Tizanidine, you know this. This is a central alpha 2 agonist. This was done in ANS topic, and it's a derivative of clonidine. You know that clonidine is alpha 2 agonist. They decrease spasticity at doses that have no effect on BP. So you may ask a question, sir, will they not affect the BP? No. And may facilitate glycine. Usually they are used in spastic disorders. Dry mouth because it's a alpha 2 blocker. Drowsiness, same reason, hypertension, similar to ethanolamine. So where do you use this? So they we use them in sprain. Suppose there is a joint pain, sprains. Now, if this is a case of dislocation, what I told in the beginning, if you want to relocate, these are not useful. The spasmolytics are not useful. Only if it is a spasm or a sprain, then we can use these drugs. Whenever there is a ligament tear, dislocations, then we can use them. Anxiety states because they are sedatives. Torticollis, this is what I told you in the beginning. Cerebral palsy, lumbago, that is backache. Others like tetanus, ECT, orthopedic manipulation, this we use skeletal muscle relaxants. Okay, guys, so that's the end of this. And remember that at the end of this, we are in a state to tell what is a skeletal muscle relaxant. Remember, we have two varieties. Either you should act on the neuromuscular junction or you should act on the central. Central means they will act on the polysynaptic reflex, they block that reflex, so we can use it in spasms. There are benzodiazepines, alpha 2 agonists like tizanidine, GABA B agonists like baclofen, and mefenacin derivatives. Now, the peripheral acting, they are two varieties direct acting and indirect acting. Direct means they act on the muscles. The rhinotide receptor blocker is dantrolene. The drug which acts on neuromuscular junction are two varieties, depolarizing and non depolarizing. Depolarizing is succinylcholine, and non depolarizing are D-tuberculin and pancuronium. Depolarizing, they have phase 1 and phase 2 blockade. Phase 1 is mainly seen, phase 2 is seen in case of apnea or high dose of succinylcholine. Now, all these muscle relaxants are used in anesthesia, in electroconvulsive therapy, during intubation, bronchoscopy. So, whatever you want to put an instrument inside, you have to relax the muscles. Central acting, they are mainly used as spasmolytics whenever there is spasm, torticollis, backache, something like that. So, that is in the gist. Hope you understood this topic. Thank you all. Take care.